Returning to inside the Philippines, most of our stories focus on men who arrived here in pursuit of something they likely should have avoided. A younger partner, a risky venture, or an unrealistic dream. And honestly, we're not here to criticize. Desperation or loneliness can push people into choices they'd never list on a resume. But today's account stands apart. The man at the center of this story is Kieran Doyle, a 55-year-old from County Roscommon, Ireland. For 3 decades, he worked as a power lines lineman for ESB Networks, the backbone of Ireland's electrical grid. This wasn't some impulsive dreamer or a love-struck fool who jetted off to Cebu after a Facebook romance with someone half his age. He approached his move the way a cautious person does anything, with thorough research, detailed spreadsheets, and a clear strategy. Yet even with all that preparation, he still wound up somewhere he never expected. Kieran's account stands out as one of the most subtly heartbreaking we've shared. No clear antagonist emerges, no explosive clash, no instant where deception is exposed. Instead, it unfolds gradually, insidious in a way that makes it harder to guard against. This one will linger. His experience begins with his profession, which sheds light on his perspective. Working on power lines, real, hands-on labor, not paperwork or computer screens, creates an intimate bond with outcomes. A hurried splice means death. A misjudged situation means death. Trusting safety without personal verification means death. Decades of that mindset, and it's no longer just routine. It shapes how you navigate everything. Double-check, review the details, take your time. I excelled at the work because I never underestimated what could fail. The real lesson, something I've reflected on often, is that this approach holds up when threats are obvious. When it's a frayed cable in a storm or a neglected utility pole. The risk is tangible, right in front of you, and if you know the signs, you can spot it. The approach falters when the threat unfolds as a slow accumulation of minor, seemingly logical choices. But I'm jumping ahead. In 2015, Una received an early-onset Parkinson's diagnosis at 49. By then, we'd been together for 23 years, settled in Athlone, with our daughter Sinead, now an adult, studying to become a teacher in Galway. Life was ordinary, then suddenly it wasn't. I won't recount the next 6 years in full. Not because the memories are unbearable, though they are. Mostly because those who've supported someone through a progressive condition already understand. And those who haven't likely can't grasp it from the outside. The pace never lets up. That's the only way to describe it. It wears you down physically. Over a stone and a half just slipped away without effort. And it reshapes how you see time. The future fades into something distant, almost abstract. All that matters is the present and what it demands. I left my job at ESB in 2019, taking early retirement to look after her around the clock. The decision took time, but once made, there was no second guessing. I still wasn't ready. Una passed away on a Tuesday in February 2021. Though I'd known it was coming for months, the reality hit differently. The home in Athlone, where we'd spent nearly 2 decades, became unbearable. I put it on the market 8 months afterward, not because I wanted to be dramatic, but because it was impossible to stay. Every time I stepped into the kitchen to brew tea, the space would swallow me whole. The place no longer felt like home. It had become a monument to something that had ended. So I let it go and took a lease on an apartment in Mullingar. Hardly the kind of fresh start most people would choose, but that's how things turned out. Between the sale, my pension payout, and the life insurance, I had 158,000 euros sitting in an account, more money than I'd ever had at once. And the truth is, I had no clue what to do with it. At 54, my body was still built for labor, my pension arrived every month, my daughter called on Sundays, and there was nothing left to upkeep. That's the part no one mentions often enough. Everyone focuses on grief as if it's the only thing that matters. And for a time, it is. But then grief fades into the background. The feeling never truly fades. It just settles into the background. And beneath that silence lingers something heavier, the hollow of having no direction. I wasn't suffering from depression, not in any official sense. I simply had no answer to the question of what a former lineman does once the lines are gone. Around 2 a.m., when the world is still and most impulsive choices seem to take shape, I stumbled upon the Facebook group. Retire Early in the Philippines, already 11,000 strong when I clicked join. Expats from all over, mostly Brits, Irishmen, Aussies and Americans, were uploading pictures of Cebu sunsets and €3 dinners, alongside detailed debates about which mobile carrier had the strongest 4G coverage in rural areas. It felt like an informal association, a bit chaotic and prone to bickering, but a genuine community of men who had stumbled upon a good thing and wanted to pass it on to others who might need it. I spent about an hour browsing through it that first night. The discussions were largely functional, focusing on visa regulations, rent prices, and which Cebu hospitals were best for specific treatments. Every now and then, there would be a warning about a bad experience, which, strangely enough, made the entire forum seem more trustworthy rather than less. It showed they were self-regulating and looking out for one another. Then, I noticed a short post from an anonymous guy in Waterford. He hadn't written much, just a line or two that went something like, "Arrived here 2 years ago with low expectations. It has given me a reason to wake up in the morning again." I reviewed the details 3 separate times. What came after feels important to explain. This wasn't some spur-of-the-moment choice. I approached it the way a lineman would before handling live wires, methodically. I dug into the SURV, the Special Resident Retirees Visa, getting a solid grasp of its basics. Then I ran cost of living estimates, double-checking them against first-hand accounts from people who'd already settled there. I scrolled through YouTube, including channels that might have resembled the one I'd eventually create myself. At my kitchen table in Mullingar, I built a spreadsheet, an honest-to-goodness, carefully structured one. It mapped out projected expenses against my pension, factoring in a safety net that, based on the numbers I'd gathered, suggested my €158,000 would stretch comfortably into my late 70s. The spreadsheet was detailed: rent, groceries, transport, healthcare, visa fees, and a miscellaneous category. What it didn't account for was inflation. It didn't leave room for decisions driven by emotion. And it certainly didn't quantify the kind of costs that don't show up in a budget. When you exhaust yourself solving everyone else's issues, because being indispensable is the only way you remember who you are. Though you hadn't realized that then. I planned a 3-week trip to Cebu City for March 2023. Not Boracay. That felt like a place for people 2 decades younger, and I wasn't about to test that assumption in front of an audience. Not Manila, either. Too overwhelming, too chaotic. I'd have spent the entire time lost in the noise. Cebu made sense: reliable hospitals, a solid expat network, and a direct flight from Dublin through Dubai that didn't require multiple layovers at my stage of life. I touched down at Mactan Cebu International at 6 in the morning and stepped into a heat that pressed against me like a living thing. Not the suffocating humidity of an Irish summer, but something richer, more enveloping. Warmth as it's meant to be. Deep, steady, all around. I paused outside the terminal, probably looking strange, just standing there, trying to name the sensation. Relief, maybe. After years of feeling almost nothing, I was warm. Not just the air, the kind of warmth that seeps into your bones. The taxi was a white Toyota, like all the others, and the driver had a small Santo Niño statue on the dash, a rosary draped around its neck. Later, I'd learned this was common, but in that moment, it struck me as oddly personal. He asked where I was from, and when I said Ireland, he grinned. Manny Pacquiao, Irish fan. I didn't correct him at that hour. The condo I'd rented was on Mactan, the same island as the airport, linked to Cebu City by a pair of bridges. A furnished, month-to-month rental on the 5th floor was listed for 28,000 pesos, around €450. It wasn't fancy, but it was tidy. A sliding door led to a narrow balcony overlooking another building with a sliver of the Mactan Channel visible if you leaned just right. I stepped outside at dawn, listening as the neighborhood stirred. A rooster crowed. There's always one. This one sounding like it had never been scolded for waking anyone too early. By 6:30 I was already out walking, heading toward the Opon Public Market, the old wet market near the town center. A post in a Facebook group had singled it out as the spot to see real local prices, and they weren't wrong. By the time I arrived, the stalls were bustling. Vendors displayed kangkong, unripe mangoes, and rows of dried fish, while whole chickens hung in ways that would horrify a supermarket buyer. A woman served me breakfast, sinengag, or garlic fried rice, with 2 eggs, a small piece of tocino, sweet cured pork, and a sachet of coffee stirred into a plastic cup. The whole meal cost 90 pesos, under €1.50. I did the math, of course, but it wasn't just about the numbers. It was the energy of the place, the deliberate hum of a market in full swing. Shouts from vendors, motorcycles weaving through crowds, a child getting scolded, someone laughing uproariously a few stalls away. After 18 months in a quiet flat in Mullingar, this felt, what's the word, invigorating. Like a cold shower, only warm. That first morning, I walked for 3 hours straight, beyond the basketball court by the market, where a few young locals were playing, despite the sweltering sun. Beyond the small neighborhood shops lifting their metal gates, each one a compact stall, offering everything from single-use shampoo packets to chilled Red Horse in mini bottles. Beyond Santa Rosa de Lima Church, where early mass had just let out, and a group of women in bright floral dresses stood in quiet conversation. Beyond a Jollibee already bustling with customers, though it had only been open a few days. For the first stretch of my stay, I followed the tourist routine, hailing a grab to SM Seaside City, the massive mall on Cebu's southern edge, mostly to pick up a Globe SIM card. I hadn't figured out another way to get one. In the evenings, I strolled along the Mactan waterfront and ate at a small eatery near my condo. The woman running it watched me with the look of someone who'd seen countless foreigners come and go. Her expectations finely tuned. I wasn't exactly happy, but I'll be honest. I felt grounded in a way I hadn't in ages. The heat forced it. There's no room for distraction in that kind of heat. You have to stay aware of every step. On the second night, I called Sinead, my daughter, and told her I'd arrived safely, that it was hot, that the food was decent. She asked, "Da, are you really going through with this?" I said I was just checking things out. There was a silence that carried more meaning than words. She warned me to stay cautious, and I assured her I always was. Something that was true, though I now see it missed the point. The dangers I'd face in the Philippines weren't the kind that could be avoided by ordinary vigilance. They demanded a sharper awareness, one rooted in knowing not just the world around you, but the state of your own mind. At the time, I wasn't in a good place, though I hadn't realized it yet. On the third day, the water heater failed, not with a bang, but with a quiet, unapologetic insistence on delivering only cold water. I called the number listed on the lease, and after nearly an hour, a man arrived at my door. He introduced himself as Ronnie, the building supervisor. Around 50, lean, with glasses perched on his forehead, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had solved this exact issue countless times before. He examined the heater, muttered something in Cebuano, likely not a compliment, then repaired it in under 20 minutes with a small tool he'd brought without prompting. When he was done, he apologized for the trouble in a way that was so sincerely polite, I almost regretted calling him at all. As he packed up, he mentioned that another tenant had dealt with the same problem in that same unit just 2 weeks earlier. "Here's your hook," in the first-person tone. "She'd fixed it herself," he added, clearly impressed. I made a comment about how capable that sounded, and Ronnie, ever the conversationalist, said he could introduce us if I wanted. "She was usually in the parking lot in the mornings," he explained, and was known for helping newcomers settle in. I agreed, without much expectation either way. That's how I met Gloria. She was standing beside a silver Mitsubishi, keys in hand, about to leave for work. Ronnie made the introduction with the brisk efficiency of someone who had fulfilled his social duty and was ready to move on. Gloria Reyes, 44, met my gaze with a directness that was somehow less unsettling than it should have been. Neutral, not unfriendly, but not putting on any kind of act. I asked, mostly to fill the silence, if she'd like to grab coffee sometime. She said she didn't drink coffee, but knew a good breakfast spot if I was an early riser. I told her I was. She said she'd knock at 6:30 the next morning, then got in her car and drove off. I stood there in the parking lot for a moment, the heat pressing in, mildly surprised at how smoothly the whole thing had come together. The next morning, she knocked at 6:25. Dressed in neat, practical work clothes, she moved with the purpose of someone who had a schedule, and was doing me a kindness by making room for me in it. Which, as it turned out, was exactly the case. She led me to a nearby Turo, a 10-minute walk away, a modest spot with just 4 tables and a counter where steam curled from simmering pots. We shared a bowl of rose caldo, the rice porridge flavored with ginger and garlic, topped with a hard-boiled egg. Without hesitation, she asked what I'd done for a living. I told her, 30 years with the power lines at the ESB. She nodded, mentioning her late husband had been a welder, adding she held more respect for those who worked with their hands than for office workers shuffling numbers they pretended had substance. I considered her words for a moment. Then, silently, I decided to stay another 2 weeks. The thought was so clear it felt spoken aloud. We met for breakfast 3 more times before my initial 3 weeks ended. Always at that same turo, always early, always her picking what we'd eat. She had an unspoken rhythm with the woman running the place, a quick point at 2 or 3 pots, a few words in Cebuano, and soon, plates arrived, always perfect. No menu ever appeared. I doubt one existed. She paid her share each time, not as a statement, just as something she did. I noticed, tucked the detail away. Mostly, we talked about everyday things. She asked about Ireland, but not the usual tourist questions. Nothing about pubs or the cliffs of Moher. Instead, she wanted to know about the electricity grid, whether rural areas were properly served, how the work had evolved over the years. There was a sharp, practical intelligence to her, one that reminded me of the engineers I'd worked beside at the ESB. People who cared about how things actually worked, not how they were supposed to look. By the time they were halfway through their second meal, Gloria brought up her daughter, Maritis. She was 21, in her second year of nursing at Cebu Doctors University, and took her studies seriously. Her grades were strong. Gloria mentioned it casually, as if simply passing along details. Nothing more, nothing less. When I asked if Marites still lived at home, she shook her head. During the school year, her daughter stayed in a place close to campus. She struck me as someone deeply independent, the kind who didn't require supervision. The way she spoke carried a quiet confidence, part satisfaction, part liberation. It was the assurance of someone who had nurtured another person into self-reliance. I stretched my stay by 14 days, justifying it with the excuse that I still needed to assess Cebu thoroughly. That much was accurate, though it wasn't the real reason we met 5 more times in that span. Twice over breakfast. Once, she brought me to the sprawling carbon market in the city, a whirlwind of activity where vendors sold everything from live seafood to used drills. I'd mentioned wanting to experience the authentic heart of local trade, not just the polished shopping centers. We wandered for hours through the sweltering crowds, and she pointed out items I wouldn't have recognized, haggling playfully with sellers as if it were second nature. Never once did she try to impress me. She never once inquired about my finances, my property, or the size of my pension. Instead, she spoke about her job at the logistics firm, the challenges with a demanding contracts manager, a delayed shipment to Mindanao that had been stuck for weeks without a clear explanation. She vented about Cebu's traffic with real frustration and pointed out a well-stocked Mercury drug branch, unlike the one near the waterfront, which was often out of supplies. At some point during the carbon market visit, while watching a man load sacks of rice onto a tricycle, she remarked, without looking at me, that she had no interest in a man who wanted a servant. Her late husband had never treated her as one, and she had no plans to reshape her life for anyone's convenience. I'm not sure what sparked the comment. We hadn't been discussing anything that would naturally lead to it. Maybe she was setting boundaries, stating it outright, so it wouldn't need repeating later. I told her I'd never wanted that kind of dynamic either. She nodded, as if the matter was settled, and bought a kilo of green mangoes from the stall in front of us. I've revisited that moment more than almost any other in this story, because it was exactly what I needed to hear at exactly the right time, so perfectly timed that I should have been more cautious. Not because she was being dishonest, I don't think she was, but because a man who had spent 6 years as someone's primary caregiver, who had built his life around being useful rather than content, hears, "I'm not looking for a servant," and interprets it as, "I won't take advantage of you." And those aren't the same thing at all. I returned to Dublin in the last week of March. The flight took 14 hours, including the layover in Dubai, and I spent much of it staring at my phone. Gloria had already sent a WhatsApp message before I'd even boarded, asking if I'd reached the gate without issue. We settled into a rhythm quickly. Her morning messages weren't affectionate, no good morning with heart emojis, just practical updates. the way she spoke in person. Traffic is terrible today. Merites passed her pharmacology exam. There's a typhoon near Samar, but Cebu is fine, I replied, and by evening, late afternoon for me in Mullingar, early evening for her in Cebu, we'd shift into longer conversations. Once, she asked what I'd eaten for dinner. I told her I'd heated a tin of soup, and she called it depressing, suggesting I learn to make sinigang, which she claimed was impossible to ruin. An exaggeration, but not by much. For 3 months, there were no demands, no emergencies, no grand emotional declarations, just two middle-aged people, 12 time zones apart, talking about the mundane details of their lives. I know how it sounds to say I found this moving, but I did. After 6 years of crisis, hospital visits, medication schedules, Una's good days and bad, the constant need to be present and alert, the simplicity of a conversation that required nothing but attention was extraordinary. She didn't need me. She wasn't asking for anything. She was just talking because she wanted to. And that, I realize now, was what I misread most. Not because it was untrue, but because I turned it into proof. Evidence that this was safe, that this was different, that she valued me for something beyond what I could give. And that certainty made me stop asking the questions I should have kept asking. I think about the first time she mentioned Mauritius's university fees in passing. Not a request, just a fact. Dropped into conversation while she was discussing something else, maybe the logistics company or the traffic. I don't remember exactly. She mentioned a shortfall for the second semester and that she was exploring options. I offered before she finished speaking. To be clear, she didn't ask. I volunteered and she accepted with a simple, "Thank you, Kieran." Genuine, but not effusive. Not the gratitude of someone who'd been waiting for the chance, just a quiet, "That would help, yes." And then we moved on. 180,000 pesos, roughly 3,100 euros. I sent it through Remitly that same week. I told myself it was a contribution to a future nurse's education, something the world needed more of. The truth was undeniable. I rationalized it the same way I might justify covering a niece's tuition or lending a neighbor a hand. Partially accurate, at least in a narrow way. What I avoided admitting, even to myself, was how satisfying it felt. Not the act of giving itself, but the quiet acknowledgement that I was the one who could fix things, who could erase the gap with a few taps on a screen. A transfer that took minutes and cost me about 2 weeks of my pension. Somewhere beneath the surface, I recognized the start of a habit, a certain rhythm taking shape. But it didn't feel like duty. It felt like kindness. And kindness is difficult to reject when you've spent years with nothing to offer. I returned to Cebu in September 2023, this time for 6 weeks. I told Sinead it was to decide whether I wanted to stay long-term. She replied with a simple "right duh," her tone implying she'd already drawn her own conclusions but wasn't going to voice them. I leased a bigger condo in Mactan, same building, different unit, 1 floor higher, with a real ocean view instead of just a hint of one. The rent was 34,000 pesos a month, roughly 550 euros. I noticed it was nearly 10,000 pesos more than the 25,000 figure I'd seen mentioned over and over in the Facebook group. I chalked it up to the specific apartment rather than any broader shift, and didn't update my records. In the 3 months of calls with Gloria, our connection had quietly become something more defined, though neither of us had named it. When she picked me up at the airport, she insisted it was practical. She already had the car. But in the arrivals hall, a single moment made the answer clear without either of us saying a word. She'd brought a thermos of coffee for herself and a bottle of cold water for me, remembering from an offhand comment months earlier that I struggled with dehydration on flights. That kind of thoughtfulness, the quiet, unremarkable kind that carries more weight than any grand gesture, made it easy to settle into comfort with her. She introduced me to parts of the city I'd missed on my own. A better wet market in Mandaue, closer and fresher than open-air one, and a bakery in Lapu-Lapu that opened at 5 in the morning, where the pandesal was still warm by 6. Her daily life had a steady, capable rhythm that I found unexpectedly soothing to be around. 2 weeks in, her mother had a cardiac event. Gloria called me at 7 in the morning, already at Chonghua Hospital in Mandaue. The one she'd explained was the best for heart cases in that part of Cebu. Her voice was calm, the way people who know how to handle crises sound. but the tension beneath was unmistakable. Her mother was 71, had been complaining of chest tightness for a week, and Gloria had been trying to get her to take it seriously. She finally agreed to go to the hospital when the pain woke her in the middle of the night. 2 stents, medication, and a slow recovery. The bills came in stages, as they always do. Gloria showed them to me without me having to ask. That detail matters. I want to be clear about it. When I asked to see them, she handed them over immediately, without hesitation, without theatrics, without any sign that she was trying to shield me from the numbers. The paperwork was thorough: hospital admission, surgery fees, pharmacy charges, the cardiologist's consultations, every expense listed. In total, the hospitalization and follow-up medications came to 420,000 pesos, about 7,200 euros. The doctors sent her home with a treatment plan. The experience was undeniably real. I'm certain of that. The hospital stay happened. The medical assessment was accurate. The expenses were legitimate. I emphasize this because what came afterward could easily be seen as manipulation, though that isn't quite the right way to describe it. Gloria's mother had a serious heart issue. Gloria was truly struggling to manage the costs, and I made the decision to step in. What I didn't grasp at the time was how that decision would fit into the family's dynamics, how it would be interpreted, what expectations it would create, and what it would imply about my place in their lives. The meal took place the next Sunday. By then, Gloria's mother had returned home, still recovering but able to move around. They gathered at the family's house in Mandawi, a sturdy concrete home on a quiet street, modest in size but well-maintained, with a small front garden where tomatoes climbed a wire fence. Gloria's 2 sisters were there, along with her brother Rolando, whom I was meeting for the first time, a stocky man in his 40s with a motorcycle parked outside and a confident grip when we shook hands. If this story hits close to home, drop a comment. I've helped others navigate this mess, and I'll do my best to guide you too. A nephew, around 12, had been given a task and carried it out with solemn focus. I found myself at the head of the table, not because anyone had asked, but as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Clearly arranged beforehand, though no one mentioned it. The spread included adobo, sinigang, pancit, and lechon kawali, dishes that had taken real effort to prepare. Bottles of San Miguel sat on the table, though no one pressed me to drink. A fruit salad in an ornate bowl made it clear this was a special occasion. The nephew sang a song in Cebuano, his performance heartfelt, earning enthusiastic applause from the family and polite confusion from me, which I tried to mask. Gloria's mother sat beside me on the left. At one point during the meal, she reached over, took my hand, and spoke to me in Cebuano, holding my gaze the entire time. There was a quiet authority in her manner, the kind that comes from a lifetime of saying only what she truly means. Gloria later told me her words meant, "You were sent by God." I had no idea how to respond. My faith is like that of many Irish people my age. Present, genuine, but subdued. It rarely surfaces, yet I grasped the depth of her words. She wasn't expressing gratitude for the financial support. Instead, she was framing my role in her daughter's life and the assistance I'd provided as something purposeful, even divinely guided, transcending mere exchange. Somewhere in my mind, I recognized the money was the reason, but that wasn't how it felt. The moment carried the weight of acknowledgement, being seen not just as anyone, but as someone specific, a person who appears when it matters, who doesn't flinch from hardship, who can be counted on. After 2 years of drifting through life in a Mullingar flat, a man the world had no real place for, that validation struck somewhere profound. I still think about that meal often. The chair already positioned at the table's head before I walked in, someone having placed it there deliberately. Not an oversight, but an act of care, thoughtfully arranged. The seat was ready before I was. The role existed before I filled it. I lacked the words for that realization then. Now, I don't. Rolando walked me to my ride as the evening ended. We shook hands again, and he told me I was good for Gloria, that the family could tell I was a man of substance. He meant it as praise. It was praise, but I see now it was also an evaluation, the kind you make when testing how much weight a structure can hold before you trust it with something important. That night, driving back to Mactan, I felt something I hadn't in ages. Not joy, exactly, More like purpose. Like I had mass, like my presence meant something tangible, something human. A man who'd spent 6 years caring for someone he loved, whose entire sense of self had been shaped by being necessary. He doesn't question the return of that feeling. He simply eases into it, the way a body sinks into a familiar form. I should have asked more about the family's expectations, their finances, what the dinner meant to them, beyond my own interpretation. I didn't. Instead, I went home and booked a flight back to Cebu for February. Christmas in Galway passed well enough. Sinead had decorated the house beautifully, as always, and a nephew's christening on the 27th gave the visit structure. Something to anchor the days. I brought gifts from Cebu, dried mangoes, local biscuits in a tin with a palm-fringed beach on the lid. Sinead's husband, Padraig, eyed the tin and said, "Very exotic, Kieran," in that Galway way of being polite when they're not quite sure what to say. I didn't mind. 2 years earlier, I probably wouldn't have known what to say either. What stood out, sitting at Sinead's kitchen table on St. the day after Christmas, while picking at cold turkey, my mind was already drifting towards Cebu, not as a getaway, but as the place I'd soon call home. For the first time, Ireland struck me as the temporary stop, the place I was merely passing through. I kept that thought to myself. Sinead would only fret, then dive into research, then start printing out stacks of articles. She had enough on her plate with 2 young kids and a full-time job. So I just smiled and chimed in about zoning laws and primary schools, a skill I'd always had. Keeping my thoughts to myself, I returned to Mullingar on January 3rd, and by the 8th, the choice was made. I was officially retiring to Cebu. The only hurdles left were paperwork. I revisited the SRI process, this time digging deeper than before. The Philippine Retirement Authority's site wasn't exactly a paragon of user-friendliness, but I managed to navigate it. For someone my age, 55 at the time of application, the required deposit was $20,000, held in an approved bank and refundable if I ever left the Philippines for good and gave up the visa. The timeline for completion took around 14 months. I conducted thorough research beforehand. To emphasize, I reviewed the PRA's official site, studied 3 discussion threads in expat communities about the process, and even watched a detailed YouTube walkthrough by an Australian applicant who chronicled every stage with almost obsessive dedication. The video ran 41 minutes, and I watched it in full, covering the deposit, banking steps, paperwork, and waiting periods. What wasn't clear, or what I failed to grasp fully, and I take responsibility for that, was the fine print on the deposit's restrictions. I knew the funds were locked in and theoretically refundable, but I didn't fully appreciate the practical implications. This money was untouchable unless I left the country permanently and formally surrendered my visa. It couldn't be used for emergencies, unexpected expenses, or anything else while I stayed in the Philippines, effectively frozen for the duration of my residency. In January 2024, I transferred $20,000, roughly $1.1 million, or $18,900 at that week's exchange rate, into the PRA's designated bank account. Then I started gathering the required documents, including a pension verification letter from ESB's HR, authenticated by Ireland's Department of Foreign Affairs. The apostille serves as a specialized international authentication. Documents, including my birth certificate, passport copies, medical clearance, and a photograph adhering to strict guidelines, were then dispatched to Manila. The PRA representative I communicated with over email mentioned that approval usually required around 14 months from the date the deposit was confirmed. By February 2024, I returned to Cebu, securing a year-long lease on a condo in a new location, a bit farther from the coast, for 32,000 pesos monthly, roughly 515 euros. It offered better affordability. I set up a local account at an Abdo branch on Lapu-Lapu's main street. It required 2 trips and more paperwork than anticipated, but I managed it in the end. A few blocks away, I picked up a used bike from a neighbor, tired of the mounting grab fares and wanting to feel more settled than a long-term visitor. Gloria and I made things official. She began spending most nights at my place. I finally had a proper conversation with Maritis. Not just the brief introduction at a family event, but a real talk over dinner she'd prepared at the condo. By then, she was 22, and in her last year of nursing school, quieter than her mother, but more observant. Across the table, she studied me with an intensity that felt both unsettling and strangely comforting. A young woman taking notice. Like her mother, she asked about my work and seemed satisfied with what I told her. I had the beginnings of a life there, a relationship, a lease, paperwork in progress. Then Rolando showed up. He arrived one Saturday morning in March, while Gloria was at her mother's. I brewed coffee, Barraco, strong enough to be useful, and we sat at the small balcony table. He explained the situation. 3 tricycles already running routes in Lapu-Lapu, a route permit about to open up through a contact in the city transport office. An opportunity, he said, that wouldn't last. A Mactan hotel chain was putting out bids for employee transport, and a registered business would have a shot. He needed 680,000 pesos, around 11,700 euros, to secure the permit and cover registration fees. A loan agreement was what he claimed to have, a signed document. Had it been witnessed, notarized? It included a repayment plan. He pushed it toward me. I took my time reviewing it, or so I believed. The numbers, the terms, the monthly installments. All of it got a close look. A seal from a notary was visible at the bottom. I never bothered to ask whose. I should have. It turned out to belong to a relative, someone studying law, still unlicensed. At that moment the thought hit me sharply, fully conscious. This is precisely what I swore I'd avoid. Back in Mullingar, scrolling through online discussions about men who'd loaned money to their Filipino partners' families, I'd read those stories and told myself, that won't be me. I know better. When Rolando sat opposite me, everything felt legitimate. The tricycles were tangible. The hotel contract was genuine. The paperwork bore an official stamp, and I had the funds. Besides, he was Gloria's brother. I had shared meals with his family, and I had half a dozen reasons to believe this time was different. So I agreed to the loan, sending the funds via GCash that very afternoon. Afterward, I went back inside, brewed another cup of coffee, and deliberately avoided looking at my spreadsheet. By March 2024, 14 months had passed. I noted the milestone on a Tuesday, registering it with the same mild concern I'd feel for an overdue routine inspection. I sent a courteous inquiry to my PRA contact in Manila. A reply arrived 4 days later, stating that my application was moving forward and that I would be notified about the next steps. It took another 6 weeks for them to get back to me. As it turned out, the layout of my ESB pension verification letter failed to match the specific template required by the PRA. The document I secured from ESB's HR team, verified by the Department of Foreign Affairs and apostilled after significant hassle and cost, didn't meet the required specifications. The proper format was outlined in a newly provided file, one I was almost sure hadn't been accessible online when I first submitted my application. From Cebu, I sent an email to HR at 11 a.m., which was 3 a.m. in Ireland. Their reply arrived the next afternoon, Irish time, with a mix of promptness and some uncertainty over the exact requirements. It took 3 exchanges to confirm the right template. Securing the revised letter took 2 weeks, another week for authentication, 10 more days for apostille processing, and then express delivery to Manila. The PRA confirmed receipt and estimated the application would take another 8 to 10 weeks to finalize. I noted the date and kept quiet about it, saying nothing to anyone during this stretch. From the February move-in through the endless delays, I was surviving on tourist visa extensions. The system works like this. You arrive on a 30-day tourist visa, extend it at the Bureau of Immigration to 59 days, then renew for another 29, capping your stay at 59 days per entry without leaving the country. Then you exit, return, and begin the process anew. Alternatively, if you'd rather avoid the hassle of leaving, the extension option lets you remain legally for up to 3 years, though it demands regular visits to the BOI office, where you'll stand in line, pay fees, and wait. The Cebu City branch is on Osmeña Boulevard, opening at 8. On my first trip, I arrived at 7:45 and was 14th in line. The entire ordeal took 2.5 hours, costing 3,100 pesos, around 50 euros, plus an optional tip for a fixer who appeared midway, offering to speed things up for a fee. I declined the first time but hired him by the third, realizing some lines in this country don't move without intervention. My initial monthly budget had been 45,000 pesos, but reality pushed it to 71,000. The extra 420 euros or so came from all directions. The condo at 32,000 instead of the advertised 25,000, visa expenses, grab fares because I hadn't accounted for how spread out everything was on an island with no reliable jeepney routes yet, and eating out more than planned. Small expenses piled up like water in a cracked ditch. Rolando never brought up the loan, not in any obvious way. He didn't turn distant or avoid me. He still joined family dinners, was polite, cooked for me when I visited, and even asked about Sinead, remembering her name from a single mention. It was oddly touching, though in hindsight, it stood out. The 680,000 peso repayment plan, with its tidy monthly figures, just faded. The first time I mentioned it, casually, in the parking lot after Sunday lunch, he said he was handling it, that the route permit was stuck in city bureaucracy, that the hotel bid had been delayed. All reasonable excuses, but impossible to confirm. The second time I asked Gloria, she echoed him. He's working on it, before steering the conversation elsewhere. The third time, her response was the same. Like this video if you're shocked by what's happening to these retirees, because trust me, you won't believe how fast paradise can turn into a nightmare. But her tone had a weary edge, as if she'd never expected to be asked again, and was tired of being caught in the middle. Eventually, I stopped counting on the money. Not officially, just in my own mind. The funds had vanished, and I understood there was no recovering them. Pushing the matter would only bring losses beyond what could be easily measured. By June, the final expenses for Maritas's nursing program arrived. The last term, clinical rotations, uniforms, supplies, and licensing exam fees totaled 210,000 pesos, roughly 3,600 euros. Gloria mentioned it that night at the condo while we ate. She didn't soften it with an apology or say, "I hate to ask once more." Instead, she laid it out plainly. Marites had to pay by the 15th, or she'd forfeit her clinical slot. Then she met my gaze. It wasn't a plea, just a straightforward truth. Marites was real, and so was the deadline. The nursing program felt legitimate. The deadline was real. I met it, but something nagged at me. Like a lineman dismissing a meter reading that's just off enough to matter. The wording had shifted, the context subtly altered. Not in any obvious way, just enough to unsettle me. That's when I started visiting a bar tucked down a side street off Lapu-Lapu's main road. Unremarkable place, plastic chairs, San Miguel in glass bottles, a ceiling fan that worked most of the time, a silent TV playing basketball. I'd avoided it before, convinced it was where jaded expats recycled the same tired stories. And in part, that was true. But I was starting to realize those stories held something I needed. There was Alistair, a retired civil engineer from Aberdeen, who'd been in Cebu for 8 years. Peter, a Dutchman who'd taught high school in Rotterdam and now taught English in Mandaue. Off the books, without the permit. He was supposed to have, though he mentioned it as casually as someone noting the weather. And Dave, a Canadian who ran a small dive shop out of a Mactan beach resort, his skin weathered from years in salt water. We exchanged observations without ever framing them as such. No one said, "Let me tell you what happened to me." We just talked, and in the talking, connections became clear. One night, Alistair, who wasn't prone to theatrics, used a phrase I'd never heard. He explained it without talking down, the way an engineer might break down load-bearing principles for someone who needed to grasp why a bridge was failing. "It's a debt you carry," he said. "Not money. Something deeper. A personal debt forms when someone makes a meaningful contribution to your family. Not one repaid in cash, but in trust, opportunity, and lasting goodwill. This obligation doesn't fade. It extends beyond the person who offered help, attaching itself to whatever they stand for. It's not exploitation," he explained. "It's an established order. The issue is, you entered it believing you were an outsider, only to realize you'd already been assigned a role." I let that sink in, long enough for Peter to order another drink, for Dave to check the basketball game, and for Alistair to hold the quiet, the way some Scots do. Later, back in the condo, I lay on the bed with the fan spinning overhead, scrolling through articles about Utang na Loob for hours. I read about OFW culture, the millions of Filipinos working overseas not as independent earners, but as part of a shared solution to their family's financial needs. About how a foreign partner often fills that same function, not out of calculation, but because that's what the position demands. The role is already there. The role carries expectations. The person in it meets them. What struck me wasn't anger. No sense of being misled or used in any straightforward way. It was clarity, like a blurry image sharpening into focus. The family hadn't reshaped Kieran Doyle to fit their needs. They'd simply directed him toward an opening that was always there. And he'd taken it without hesitation, because for him, filling those gaps was how he felt most alive. That was the part that tangled me up, and I was only starting to untangle it. The laminated SRV permit arrived on a midweek October day in 2024, 16 months after I'd transferred the initial funds. A compact, government-issued card bearing my photo, a reference number, and the words, Special Resident Retirees Visa, in the unmistakable typeface of bureaucratic paperwork. I turned it over in my hands at the kitchen table, registering little more than a dull acknowledgement. The $20,000, equivalent to over £1,000,000 pesos or nearly 19,000 euros, now sat locked in a Philippine bank account, untouchable unless I left the country for good and formally relinquished the visa. Since I had no plans to depart, the money might as well have been orbiting a distant planet. I was the official holder of a retiree visa and, in effect, the custodian of an asset I couldn't access for as long as the visa remained in my name. The irony of it struck me that Wednesday as almost elegant. I tucked the card into my wallet and stepped out for my usual morning walk. By the weekend, I'd pulled out a notebook, not a spreadsheet, because I needed the weight of pen on paper to force myself to confront the figures, and tallied everything. Here was the starting point, 158,000 euros, and here was where it had gone. The SRV deposit, 18,900 euros, now frozen. Merites final 2 semesters of university fees, 6,600 euros. Gloria's mother's hospital bills and prescriptions, 7,200 euros. The Rolando loan, which I'd written off, 11,700 euros. Then the steady drip of living expenses in Cebu over 18 months, each small overage adding up. Every month, the difference between my expected earnings of 45,000 pesos and the actual 71,000 pesos added up, around 14,000 euros in total. Then there were the flights. 2 trips back to Ireland, one for Christmas 2023, and another in August, when Sinead insisted I join for a family event I couldn't skip. That set me back 3,400 euros. The rest went to little extras, gifts for family whenever I visited, holiday decorations for the condo that I splurged on just to make it feel more festive, and a used motorbike I bought in May only to sell at a loss by August after realizing the traffic was too much. All in all, that's about 8,000 euros. Between spending and unplanned costs, the total came to roughly 70,000 euros. The available savings, around 68,000 euros, sit untouched, with the SRV deposit still out of reach. I mulled over those figures for a while, then brewed some coffee and let them sink in again. This isn't a disaster. I need to be clear about that, because framing it as one would be misleading. My ESB pension arrives monthly, totaling 1,480 euros after taxes, which converts to roughly 92,000 pesos at today's rates. With the SRV in place, my expenses, no longer burdened by visa fees, average about 68,000 pesos in a frugal month. That leaves me with 68,000 euros in liquid savings as a safety net. As long as Cebu's cost of living doesn't outpace my pension increases, I can stay here indefinitely without dipping into those reserves. If it happens, I'll need to weigh my options. But I'm not without resources. I'm not defeated. At 55, I arrived in a new country, with more wealth than I'd ever known, and far less understanding of myself than I believed. Now, the money's dwindled, but my self-awareness has grown. Whether that's a fair exchange remains to be seen. I'm still considering it. That next Sunday, I spoke with Gloria. It wasn't an argument. I've never been one to handle those well. Anyway, the moment didn't call for a clash, just an honest talk. I explained that I couldn't keep being the family's financial safety net for every problem that came up. When I mentioned Utang Nilob, she studied me closely, as if weighing what I was saying about the role I'd taken on. I made it clear I didn't blame anyone. I'd chosen this path myself, kept choosing it because it was familiar. But I wasn't an overseas worker. I wasn't a bottomless account. I was a man living on a fixed income, with a limit neither of us had fully faced. And that limit was tighter than we'd admitted. She heard me out. No tears, no pushback, no bargaining. Just a quiet, I get it. She'd hoped there'd be no need to spell it out. I've turned that line over in my mind many times. Did it mean she understood and was waiting for me to hit my breaking point? Or did she just assume, in good faith, that I'd keep agreeing because I always had? I honestly can't say. Both could be true, even at once. This is a place where people often sidestep direct talk, where issues are circled rather than confronted head-on, and I'm someone raised in County Roscommon to believe that if you have something to say, you say it, and if you don't, you've already accepted things as they are. In that sense, we weren't exactly suited for the kind of conversation I was trying to have. Beyond that, it's hard to define. Messy. Probably my own doing for not setting boundaries sooner. Back when boundaries would have been simpler to set. We still meet for breakfast now and then at the Turo Turo. Still early. Still her picking what to eat. She still knows which Mercury drug location to use. She still doesn't drink coffee. None of that has changed. I came here searching for a way to stop missing Una. What I found instead was a way to stay occupied enough that I didn't have to feel it for stretches at a time. There's a difference. I'm old enough now to recognize it. For anyone watching who's considering any version of this, the retirement, the SARV, the relationship with a Filipina and her family, here's what I'd say straight. From one realist to another, read every line of the SARV terms before sending a single peso. Not just the summary. The original paperwork, not the YouTube clip, the genuine terms, the precise criteria for refund eligibility. The funds are legitimate, the stipulations are binding, and the processing period is accurate. Yet nothing is as simple as online discussions imply. Avoid entering into any loan agreement in the Philippines if the contract is notarized by a relative. Steer clear entirely. Understand utang na loob before you sit at the head of anyone's table. Before you cover the first hospital bill. Before you offer. Before you're asked. The framework exists whether you know it exists or not. Better to know. And budget for the Philippines as it actually is. Not as it was in the Facebook posts from 3 years ago. The mangoes cost the same. Everything else has gone up. Every morning at 6, I head to the market. By the time I arrive, the stalls are already bustling. A rooster crows somewhere nearby. I pick up whatever catches my eye, take it home, and turn it into a meal. Cooking started as a necessity here, but over time, it became something I actually enjoy. The mangoes are still sweet, and for some reason, that small consistency brings me comfort. It's proof that not everything works against you. This is Kiaran's experience, and we at Inside the Philippines appreciate his openness in sharing it. There's a simpler version of this story, one with a villain, a con, a moment of sharp betrayal. That version is easier to digest because it offers a clear moral and a clear enemy. Kiaran's story lacks those sharp edges, which makes it harder to guard against. He came here burdened by loss, by a lifelong instinct to be useful, and by more money than he'd ever handled before. He met a woman who was sincere, but she was also part of a family that already had a place for him. A place he kept filling, again and again, because it was the only role he knew how to perform. The Philippines didn't create that weakness, it only revealed it. Gloria isn't the antagonist here. Rolando, by strict definition, isn't a lawbreaker either. The SURV is a valid visa, though its complexities could have been clearer to someone who read the fine print more thoroughly than Kiaran did. What happened, if it can even be called a mistake, was a disconnect. A man still processing loss stepped into a cultural obligation framework he didn't fully grasp, at a time when agreeing seemed easier than any other choice. For those considering retirement in the Philippines, the SRUV paperwork guide is available below. Compile it with input from people who've navigated the system and know its pitfalls. Follow it closely. If you're in the early stages of a relationship with a Filipina and her family's financial requests are coming faster than you can evaluate them, that doesn't necessarily signal trouble, just a need for deeper understanding. Culture shapes these moments. The real test is whether you've talked openly, clearly, about what you can truly handle. Do it soon. Do it honestly. Do it before you're the one everyone looks to, before someone's family takes your hand and says you were meant for this. This was Inside the Philippines. Until next time.